thank you for being here. Yeah, so I'm here with, well, on the distant between me. I was Emily Cox, the main singer and producer of the piece as a whole, and also we have the Goodwin in from Los Angeles, who is librettist of the first part of the cycle that you first heard. So as I mentioned, what you've just heard is the world premiere of the first of 3 stories that make up this cycle. Do you want to talk about why it's in multiple stories and where they're coming from, to sort of start introducing people to what this project is about, and where it's come from and where you want it to go?
Sure, absolutely. So, well, first of all, Emily definitely transcends her title of soprano and producer. She is a co-creator and collaborator on this piece, as it is it is our stories, the 3 of our stories, the composer, Dan Felsenfeld, mine, and Emma's relationships with disordered eating. We thought that this is a project that we have been talking about for a while. Emma and I just met yesterday.
In person.
So this was all on Zoom.
We've been doing all of this over Zoom.
But Dan was a common thread between the 2 of us. I have an opera with Dan, and Emma has premiered his works before, and we had bonded about this topic, and it just seemed like a no-brainer for the 3 of us to come together, share our stories, and for me to start writing. I originally came up with this concept 10 years ago when I was graduating college, and the latter half of what you heard was going on, and I had thought to myself, art needs to be made from this. I couldn't determine at that point if it was selfishly it needed to be out of me somehow. But then with time and maturity, I realized that there are signs, there is education to be had within this one story. A primary thing is the notion that anorexia stops when you graduate college. Well, my mother was well into her 60s when we were wrestling with this, so it doesn't. Something else that we wrestle with is that it only affects women, and no, it doesn't. Dan, the composer, had wrestled with this all of his life, and we wanted to unearth and excavate those different common notions, and really put them under the microscope and create something from them in an educational way that people could both find themselves and their stories within it, and also see someone else's story as well. It's, I've never met anyone other than Dan who had a parent who suffered from this. It's silence. It's interesting that this is an operatic art song in 3 parts, because it is such a silent subject matter that no one really talks about. We all wrestle with it in silence, and this is such like a beautiful, beautiful celebration of song and an investigation of song. So yeah.
Yeah, it's real hard to get people excited about this topic.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of, oh no, we need to talk. So we met on a Zoom, and we were just sitting and talking with one another. And B had mentioned that she and Daniel were talking about disordered eating. And I felt comfortable with them enough that I came forward and I was like, this is something that I'm addressing myself. And then I mentioned that I had been looking up statistics because I am left-brained, weird, and I love data. I'm all about data. And PTSD, your brain is like a sieve. You can't remember things. And so I write things down, and I use data as empirical evidence to remind me of things when I needed that. So I had just looked up all of this information from the National Center for Disordered Eating, and they predicted that, and this is just a prediction, there was an 8% worldwide increase in disordered eating since 2020, and it was 2022 when we were talking. And they could not give an actual number of what they thought. And all I could think of was, oh my God, I would not wish this on my worst enemy. I cannot begin to tell you the noise in my head every single day and trying to get the noise to stop. So we were just talking about this, and I went, this is the reason why these insidious mental illnesses, and they are mental illnesses, are allowed to continue. It is a disease that festers in silence. So, we almost all died. 4 years ago? What do you want to do with your one and only life? Do you want to make an impact with your art? Well, then let's go. And part of that is being vulnerable and being open. And it was so funny that for a year and a half, almost 2 years now, we've been working, and I had never met this individual until yesterday in person. But I was able to sit down, and the three of us actually wrote out our stories. Dan wrote his experiences, B wrote hers, I sat down and wrote mine, and then we sent them to B, who took on the emotional labor of reading them, transcribing them into poetry, sending them back to us to make sure it was what we were all looking for, and making an arc out of all three stories. So what was really beautiful about that is it gives you enough distance as a creator to see where you can go, but it is still personal enough that you can add that vulnerability and that connection to it. So that was step one, was just making the damn thing and figuring out what pieces we wanted to go where. And then the next step was fundraising and creating a media packet and starting to market and approach people. And again, this was a hard sell. It's not a happy topic. It is an important topic that needs to be discussed, but a lot of people want to discuss it. So it was interesting to try to see the project pick up steam and who was supporting it and how and why. And in the end, when we do this full piece, it's going to be semi-staged, memorized, with projections, which I think is going to be incredibly impactful. And so the hope is that we use this as an educational tool. We want to bring Howard Brown Health on board. We want to take this on tour across the nation and start talking about these, because this is not going to get better. We were talking the other day, I was on an Instagram post that was about Ozempic and the weight loss drugs. And here were all these comments from young people. I mean, we're talking 14, 15 babies. And they're saying, oh yeah, I've got a lot of food noise in my head. I got a lot of food noise in my head. And I'm like, food, no, those are disordered thoughts. That's a sign that there's a larger issue. But we're calling it something trendy and sexy to try to diminish the impact. And it's like, no, we need to talk about this. Mm-hmm. So it is still a very viable subject. It's a very personal subject. It's a very frightening subject to bring up with some people. There's a lot of defense mechanisms. But I think the overall experience of going and sitting and having a communal experience is going to be very healing. Not for me, for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you both for telling all of this just thoroughly and bravely. This is sort of bravery that I think it is often all too easy to sort of separate from a notion of sort of what should go into what is composable, of what of classical or operatic music or song it can talk about
what it
classically.
Should be.
But this is also one of the power of music as a field, is that we are finding ways to bring it into all the parts of our lives. But I want to turn it over towards folks in the audience, if they have any questions or things that they want to comment or say about what they've experienced already.
I told you this is a hard subject.
And also, there's a lot to process.
Yeah.
Goodness knows, in a talkback, sort of the instinct to fill the silence is
So I'm really curious about what the process is, if you can talk about it, of turning these stories into something that is poetic and then is set to music.
Oh, that's all you, girl.
For sure. So as Emma was alluding to before, there is an arc of the three pieces. It begins with my parent story and ends with Dan as a parent going through all of this, and Emma's is nestled in between, and we really experience innocence within that, and kind of like the gradient of childhood that runs throughout these three pieces while anchored by generational trauma of eating. These packages that Emma and Danny provided me were, there was quite a breadth to them, and I had to sit with them, and it sounds so sterile to talk about, but find the story. Like, there are so many instances in Emma's life where this ghost, it comes to her, and there are anchor points of different relationships that have triggered this, and I had to find where I wanted to pinpoint and unravel. So Emma's story was the one I did after my own, and actually I think that I wrote Baiting the Dough, the first song, and then I worked from that, and then I tackled Dan's story, which was definitely impacted by what mine and Emma's had been shaping up to be. So yeah, it was just a very fascinating process of going through a living friend and collaborator's life and finding the story. And I know for Dan, the composer, I don't want to speak for him, but I know that it was very difficult because he's like, this is your thing, like you write the words, and I find it like you're the one who primarily always feels vulnerable, and like I'm behind that, but you know, he's writing about his own circumstance and his own life. So yeah, it definitely, it was the most challenging thing I have ever done. It absolutely was.
I think he did a really beautiful job of matching the music with the drama of the piece too.
Absolutely.
Like, there are so many repeated notes throughout the whole thing that are supposed to be your heartbeat, and then it turns into almost like a fight or flight instinct, and it picks up, and there are so many changes of tempo. It's almost like a change of thought immediately, like you're chasing that ghost, or you're trying to silence these voices, and they're all just clamoring on top of one another. Mm-hmm. And that made it really easy to learn the piece. It is not easy music. It is not easy music. It is very difficult music. But it made it easier to follow and understand instinctively what you were asking for and what Dan was asking for, because I could see these small little snippets of the actual drama that enhanced the story, which I thought was really well done on both of your parts.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
I have a lot of feelings right now, and I'd have to use probably more expletives than I want on a live stream. So let me just ask a practical question. What is the timeline like for this? Where do we go to learn more? How do we follow it?
Oh, brilliant. So the timeline for it is, it's a 60-minute long piece. We are planning on doing a full world premiere here in Chicago in the fall. We're courting venues right now. By summer, we should be able to announce that. I'm hoping by August that we will have the contracts nailed down. If you would like to learn more about the piece in its entirety, the project descriptions, the stories, there's a lot of facts and resources for if you need them, are all on the website, written on the table where you starvedme.com. You can also find a link to it on my Instagram. I'm at the Blonde Hurricane, or on or on Bees, which is
a song from B.
A song from B. But yeah, I'm happy to send anybody the media packet that they want. It's several pages long, but it goes greatly into detail. And there are the composer's notes and B's notes and, you know, my schlop that I put on there. But the next step is we're going to start setting up. We're doing the premiere here in Chicago, and then we want to go to LA, and we want to do it in New York too.
Yeah, that's the basis of which I'm based out of LA, Dan is based out of New York, and obviously Emma is here.
Hit the big three.
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch on the different forms of disordered eating that are in the piece? Because I know obviously this first one is about anorexia, but I know that there's different forms from the other experiences.
Did you want to talk from your
Yeah. So we have, so the generational trauma is throughout. That is sort of the overlaying theme. Without even realizing it, a parent can very easily pass on a way of thinking or a mannerism or a habit without realizing it. And so I think through all three, that is a common thread. For me and my story, I think I'm a cautionary tale. I came from a very, very small town in southern Indiana, where I encountered a lot of, trigger warning, sexual abuse. And that is where a lot of my anorexia came from. I also suffer from body dysmorphia. I used to be able to tell you down to the ounce exactly how much I weighed and how long. And it was to the point where I actually delayed my developmental changes in my body. I am physically 5 to 6 years younger than I should be because of the stress hormones and the level that I was emitting. So that's cool and also weird and awful. But that's the level that this can take you to. So I personally have body dysmorphia and anorexia.
And Danny has wrestled with bulimia his entire life. And we explore the first time when that had happened, when he was 13 through now.
Again, youth and that shifting change when your body's changing, that's the time that you will start to see a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, we explore a little bit in Dan's passage that Karen Carpenter died 2 months after he started self-inflicting, and her death unfortunately was the first time that people were able to talk about anorexia and bulimia and how there are very big dangers attached to this disease, this terrible, terrible thing. And so Dan grew up in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of spirit of media and look and aesthetic attached to that portion, whereas Emma's is about more rural farmland isolation, crying out for help. So yeah, those are different sonic profiles and poetic profiles attached to the different faces of disordered eating, 3 of them.
There are. This isn't by no means representative of all disordered eating out there, and there are different gradients, and some are more extreme than others. But it was, it was important for us that we put this out because it is crazy that 3 people from literally the 3 different sides of the nation are encountering the exact same issue at the same time. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many thousands of others are? Mm-hmm. Everybody looks so happy.
No, but it's the kind of question that is more than well worth sitting with. Although I think, as we might sort of like bring this to a bit of conclusion, I think just as part of it is like as a last question is for those who listen and may encounter this, are there resources that we should know about, either anyone who is affected by this or might know somebody who's affected by this or not know yet that someone is affected by this? What is this of like what things that folks should know or places people can go to?
Do you want
just
to
to have
reference things in the media
PSA
package?
a little
Yes, there are a ton of resources you can go to. There's the National Center for Anorexia. There's the National Center for Disordered Eating. There's the National Center for Disordered Eating Recovery and Support. And those are 2 different ones. There are a plethora of online free resources, PDFs, worksheets, quizzes, questionnaires. You can go to these websites and you can take that. You can also go to Howard Brown Health here in this area, and there is a quiz and a questionnaire that they have on their website as well that will help you figure out if this is something that you're suffering from. Because again, if this is normalized, and for a lot of people it is baseline normal, it is very hard to realize that there is relief and resources out there.
Absolutely.
That this is not a ghost or a thing you got to carry around with you forever. I would highly recommend anybody who is considering that they might be suffering from this to explore those resources. Northwestern Medicine has a fabulous page as well. That's a local resource. I would also encourage you to reach out to a counselor. There's a lot of telehealth out there right now. I find that I like to take my telehealth at home because this is such a personal illness, and it affects everything. I mean, without realizing it, for many, many years in grad school, I was suffering from not being able to breathe. And so I literally could not sing because I was so tight. So like it will affect your being able to do your job, to express yourself, to do your art, to just live your life. So if you feel like this is something that you need to explore, please know there are resources out there. And there are large communities and forums that you can join that will help you with disordered eating and recovery and support.
I thank you for that. And
Thank you for giving us a platform
Yeah,
for this.
really
Like I really
appreciate
feel
it.
like this is some of the most important work that I've ever done as an artist. Truly.
I'm just, I think, honored that New Music Chicago can be part of making that happen.
Thank you.
So keep an eye on the project, and yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thanks for sharing your story.
Absolutely.